Hi, I'm Steve Graves, and this video is to help you prepare the mallet parts for the Kansas Bandmasters Association Middle Level Honor Band. I also have the pleasure this year of being the conductor of the band, so I'm really looking forward to working with you. Rather than just play through the parts, what I'd like to do is make sure that number one, we understand the key that the parts are in and play through the scale that's related to that piece of music. That'll help you get familiar with the parts of the keyboard you're going to be playing on. Then go over any tricky spots on each piece. Stickings, different registers of the instruments that you want to make sure you understand. And finally, be able to hear some parts of it played along with the recording. I hope this will help you prepare, and I know we're going to have an awesome time playing together. Let's get right to it, and let's start with El Camino de Anaheim. So El Camino de Anaheim is actually in the key of C minor, which is closely related to E flat major. It has the same key signature. Let's start by first going over E flat major. Starting on E flat, we're going to also include the flats of A flat and B flat. Now C minor uses that same key signature. E is flat, A is flat. Usually B is flat, but this version of minor has a raised seventh note. So we're going to use B natural instead. You're going to see that B natural pop up a few times on the marimba part and once on the bell part. So we're going to start on C, but keep that same key signature in mind. Raised seventh. Let's do that one more time. C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B, C, B, A flat, G, F, E flat. That's the key we're going to be working in on this piece. The bell part for El Camino de Anaheim is pretty straight ahead. Often you have the melody, you have some occasional B naturals, and sometimes B flat, so we want to watch for that. Here's a little chunk of the introduction. 1, 2, 3. The second time is exactly the same. You want to use a light touch on bells, and I'm using these aluminum mallets, but some hard plastic mallets might also work depending on the set of bells that we have there at rehearsal. So we'll try some different things, but a light touch, even when it's forte, getting off the keys, not playing into them. At 14, the part should be heard but light. Here's the part at measure 14. 1, 2, 3. 1. Now let's look at the marimba part for El Camino de Anaheim. Here's an example of that B natural that pops up right away, and we're just going to play the introduction. Let me get a metronome going. I'm going to set it at 112 beats a minute, which is the tempo we're going to take this tune at. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. There you go. And it matches the rhythms that you'll hear in the band. Now looking at measure 5, you're going to notice it says second time only. So really when you start playing is at the first ending. So we're going to start there at the first ending. This is also an example where we don't have B natural, but you're going to play B flat. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. And you can play everything in a very separated style when you're playing that melodic part. Now look what happens at the music in 14. You'll see the symbol 8VB. That means play an octave lower than written. This allows you to read the part in the staff, but you're really going to be playing an octave lower. So instead of starting on G here, we're going to play the part starting down here. So this is the part at 14. And notice that it's softer and it's the bass line. One, two, three, four. Now notice the last note, the measure before 22, says loco. That doesn't mean crazy. That means we're going to play that note in the octave that it's written. So when you see loco, it means play where it's written. So we're back up to this octave. Let's look at the part at measure 30. Notice it says dead stick. What that means is we're going to press into the keys to take out some of the resonance. So instead of, we want to get a dead sound this way. That gives us a very short and staccato-like sound. You want to make sure that both mallets are hitting together. So here's that part. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice that the last measure was played normally. No dead stick, and also forte. Now let's take a look at what happens from measure 38 to the end. The part's in a normal register. When you get to measure 44 and 45, it says trill. So a trill typically means you're playing two notes alternating, the note that's written and the note above it. So in this case, it's going to be G and A flat. Those two notes. Okay? So here's the part starting one note before 38. I'm also going to roll the longer notes, the half notes in this part. 1, 2, 3. Crescendo. The bell part for El Camino de Anaheim is pretty straight ahead. Often you have the melody, you have some occasional B naturals, and sometimes B flats, so we want to watch for that. Here's a little chunk of the introduction. Now let's hear the song with both parts being played. Starts right away, so I'm going to do my best to catch that first note. Let's talk for a minute about the setup for the xylophone and chime part. It's really important that you can get to both instruments quickly because there's some very fast transitions. You should have a music stand with a towel or a trap table set up very close by so that you can set all of your mallets there. You don't want to rely on setting them on the instrument because they could fall off or make a noise. I'm going to be using different chime mallets here. Usually it's a rawhide mallet. Sometimes there's a nylon mallet you can use, and that works well for single notes. You might have a pair of them for our performance. I like these tornado mallets. They work really well on chimes. They look a little bit different, but you can get to the notes very easily. You want to have your chimes set up so that you can see the music, and you want a separate music stand for the chimes than you do for the xylophone. So I have one set low and near my keys for the xylophone, and I have one set right up in my view about as high as I can get it for the chimes. On the chime part, most of the time you're playing a lot of the same notes back and forth. Where it gets a little tricky is at 52, and I'd highly recommend memorizing your part from 52 to 57. That'll allow you to focus on listening to the pulse and playing the chimes, and quite honestly, that's the way it's done with chime parts a lot, especially if they're more difficult. If you haven't played on the chimes much, here's a quick little lesson on them. Most chimes will have a pedal at the bottom which keeps them from ringing, much like a vibraphone, where if you hit the key and then let up on the pedal, it'll stop the note from ringing. On my particular set of chimes, that feature is not working, so my notes will ring. But hopefully you'll have a set where the damper pedal works, so when you press it down when you play and lift it up when you don't want the notes to ring anymore. Striking spot on the chime should be on this crown right here, not on the tube. So you're trying to strike right there on the crown. You don't want to bang into the chime or it's going to slap back against the frame that way. So you want to just get off the key really quick. That way. At the end of this piece, it asks for you to scrape the top and bottom rows of chimes in opposite directions with the pedal down. It's kind of a special effect, so they're asking you to do this. And it says to do it in whole notes, but really, they just emphasize beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's really what they want there. Again, you're going to need to make some quick transitions to be able to set these down and pick up your xylophone mallet, so make sure you have a trap table that's handy right here. The keyboard parts on Dark Ride are probably the most challenging, not because of the notes written, but mainly because of the speed required to keep up with and some different stickings. We're in the key of D minor, which is very similar to the key signature of F major. In F major, we have only one flat, B flat. D minor uses that same key signature but starts on the note D. It's also the minor version that has the raised 7th degree. So you're going to see C sharp popping up a lot in this music. For instance, your first two measures. Use that C sharp. The other thing to be considered on this piece is the sticking. At measure 15, you have a repeated pattern that uses two notes a lot, two notes on each hand. Now you could play that hand to hand, but that's a lot of work. The general rule in sticking on percussion is don't play more than 2 notes on each stick in a row. So in this case, it would be acceptable to go right, right, left, left. As long as both notes are even. We don't want one note stronger. They need to be even. Practice that slowly to make sure the notes are even. Now at 19, the sticking's reversed. It's left, left, right, right. I want to draw your attention to measure 21 and 22. 21 uses G sharp and B natural. All the G's in that measure and all the B's in that measure. G's are sharp and B's are natural. The accidental applies. The next measure, it switches back to G natural and B flat. Now there's two ways you could play that measure. Notice that I had to cross to get to that E. You could go left, left, right, right, left, right, left, right. And that sets you up to go back to left, left. Or you could cross the way I did and just get your hands out of the way. I think either would work well, whatever is the smoothest for you. Looking at the second ending at measure 27, there's a grace note right before the last note in that measure. And that's played like you would a flam on a snare drum. You're going to play the C sharp right before the D, a little bit softer than a D. So that measure, C sharp though, not C natural. That way. Then very quickly you have to get to the next set of notes. So a couple particular things about the xylophone part on Dark Ride. First of all, that you have to get to it quickly from the chime part, so have the mallets ready on the table. We have a lot of double stops on this one, and it's imperative that the mallets are hitting together. And not a flam. We don't want, they got to be right together. Often you're playing the same notes, but be careful. At measure 21, it changes to this. Then 22, you've got E flat and G, then C sharp and E. So it's kind of a parallel motion there before you come back to center on D and F. And then measure 25, you've got the G sharp and E, then E flat G. So rather than a parallel motion, it's an alternate motion. And then the run. At the very end of the song, you have a glissando on the xylophone, and it's really important that we hear the whole thing. So there's a couple ways to do it. The way I recommend is to hit the first note, which is low A, and drag the mallet up to D and have the other mallet prepared to hit D. So 1, 1. So we hear the starting note. Clearly, we hear the glissando, which requires you to use a little bit of pressure, and the top note, 1. Using a hard acrylic mallet will help. We want something that's going to cut through. So let's hear this part with the music. Let's talk about the bell part for Destiny Fanfare. While the bell part is pretty straight ahead, it's a really important part, especially in sections like the beginning and at 55 at the end, where you have this eighth note pattern. Again, you want to try and use a light touch on the bells. Measure 12 has 3 notes, and they're marked mezzo piano, but they need to be heard. It's a really important little part there. The rest of the part is fairly melodic. On the very last note, I'd like you to have a hand free to not let it ring too long. Here's what the parts sound like together for Destiny Fanfare. The marimba part for Softly Speaks Tonight is a supporting part. So while you might be used to hearing keyboard parts playing the melody on this part, you're not going to hear a lot of melody. Also, you should use the softest mallets that you can. We don't want this sound, but rather a much more blended sound. Softly Speaks Tonight starts out in B flat and then goes to the key of E flat. Now we've already looked at the key of E flat. Key of B flat. Let's just practice that scale slowly. Ready? Go. B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat. So A naturals in this key signature, and then later when we go to the key of E flat, A flat. So just be aware of that. There are also some spots on the marimba part where it says 8 VB. Remember that that means to play an octave lower, and loco means to play where written. So let's just play the beginning part that starts at measure 5. This is slow, 76 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice that you want to try to get your rolls to blend together as much as possible. So use a light touch. If you press too hard, we're going to hear the strokes. And we don't really want to hear the strokes. We just want to hear a nice tone. At measure 16, you're back to where it's written. And you want to be able to recognize your ledger lines going all the way down to low G, low A, low B flat. That's about as low as the ledger lines go on this one. So here's your part starting from measure 16. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. That last note's actually an F, isn't it? There. Okay, and then here's your part going into measure 35. So starting at measure 33, where it's written, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. A flat, key change. Down to G, A flat again. Then the next part, down an octave. Then where it's written. So use a real light touch on that part. Let's talk about the vibraphone part on Softly Speaks the Night. If you haven't played vibraphone much, you need to know that it works very much like the chimes with a pedal, and the pedal controls whether the notes don't ring or ring. In the case of this piece, because it's smooth, we want to have all of the notes ringing together. You're going to need to use a pedal technique to keep the notes from rubbing against each other or from playing over each other. If I just keep the pedal down, listen to what it sounds like. We have some dissonance in there when these notes are being played at the same time. So two ways that you can do that. The easiest way, and the way that you're probably going to use most often, is this pedal technique where you pedal each note just as you play it. You don't need to release the pedal all the way down and all the way up, just enough for this little felt damper to touch the key and stop it from ringing. Sounds like my vibraphone needs a little lubrication there. Another more advanced technique is to dampen the mallet, or dampen the note. And you do that by taking a mallet and starting at the dead spot and coming across. And you do that when you're playing the next note. That's another way to get smooth legato playing on a vibraphone without using the pedal. Whichever technique works best for you is the one you should use. Let's hear all these parts played together.